Since 2007, Jaguar have been building themselves a stable of some pretty decent cars. It started with the original XF, and then in 2010, the XJ. Shortly thereafter, the F-Type, and more recently, the XE. And they all offered something a little bit different and with superb packaging. And now they've tried their hand at making an SUV. The F-Pace is the company's first attempt at building a car that isn't scared of some dirt driving, besides the fact that that's the only thing that sister company Land Rover builds. And with that heritage already in the family, you might be asking yourself why Jaguar felt the need to make one at all. The simple answer is peer pressure. There isn't a mainstream manufacturer in business today who doesn't make some sort of SUV, so they must have felt a bit left out. That, or it has something to do with SUVs being massive sellers. Either way, Jaguar are less inclined to talk about this car's off-road ability and are focusing quite heavily on what they're calling its engaging drive. They talk a lot about its lightweight construction and how that makes it sporty. But really, there's nothing on paper to suggest that this car is significantly better than anything else. And that's besides the fact that I don't really believe that cars like this can be proper driving machines. We had planned to cover a fair distance in our 3-litre V6 supercharged F-Pace, including a good stretch of dirt driving. With 280 kilowatts and 460 newton meters, the big Jag gets from 0 to 100 in 5.5 seconds and onto a top speed of 250 kilometers an hour. So it certainly has the power requirements. The 8-speed ZF gearbox, which is brilliant in other Jags, sometimes feels a little too slow to respond, but the chassis certainly seems as though it's up to the challenge. It's helped out by a few bits borrowed from Jaguar's sports car, the F-Type. Our S-Spec test car is fitted with things like torque vectoring and active dynamics, which is a system that constantly adjusts the dampers to give the best possible ride setup. But really, more than the confident handling and the agility that that system delivers, it's the way it makes the F-Pace feel smaller than it actually is that impresses. You combine that with very satisfying mid-range punch from the motor, and what you have is an SUV that is actually quite sporty. The steering is nicely weighted, and in dynamic mode the suspension is tightened up just enough to help with feel without making the F-Pace unbearably hard. The almost all-aluminium chassis, which makes the car's momentum easier to deal with, also gives the F-Pace a curb weight of 1,800 kilograms, which is right in the middle of the cars against which it competes, the BMW X4 and the Porsche Macan. Both of which are some pretty tough competition, offering a mixture of a great drive and top spec. From a styling point of view, neither of them might be your favorite, but you have to admit that they both have a certain something. And the F-Pace has a certain something too. The styling is straight out of the Jaguar handbook, but that really isn't a bad thing. With its XF face and its F-Type rear end, the details are certainly striking. It has a slight coupeness to the profile, and rather than being muscular like the others, it has a more athletic appeal. Perhaps because of that, it also looks like the kind of SUV that prefers life in and around the city, where the likelihood of it encountering any dirt would be minimal. For those rare occasions when it does, the F-Pace is fitted with all-wheel drive as standard. There's no rear-wheel drive option like they get in Europe. What you do have the option of is 22-inch wheels, which is what our test car is riding on. Not the best choice for dirt driving conditions, but the all-wheel drive system in here keeps things nicely under control, even on a very loose surface like the one we're on at the moment. And that allows you to concentrate on avoiding those bigger than usual stones and rocks that will almost certainly blister your 22-inch tire. Low-speed traction is also good, and pulling off on loose gravel is drama-free. The all-wheel drive system spends most of its time sending power to the rear wheels only. When more traction is needed, it can send up to 50% to the front. There are no off-road specific modes, no terrain response type systems, which is more evidence that this car really wants to spend its time on tar, where surprisingly the noise generated by those massive wheels remains mostly unheard. If you like a Jaguar interior, you'll be very satisfied with what's going on in here. And if you've never experienced one, we'll take a look at any current Jag, and it'll give you a very good idea of the F-Pace setup. It is very comfortable with a focus on clean design, and that includes some top tech. The rotary controller is old hat now, but things like the virtual instruments are still relatively new, and the F-Pace packs a particularly nice set. Connectivity abounds, and Jag's app-enabled infotainment system is convenient, if a little lacking in terms of user-friendliness in some aspects. There is a surprising amount of hard plastic on the lower section of the doors. It remains out of sight for the most part and doesn't detract from the overall impression of good quality and solid build. Still, not the kind of thing you'd expect in a 1.2 million rand car. Space is very SUV-like, plenty of room in the back, and despite the fact that the full-size spare requires a cover that eats into the boot space slightly, it has the biggest load capacity when compared to the X4 and the Macan. Calling the Jaguar F-Pace an SUV is doing it a bit of a disservice because although it is big and it has the space you might expect, it just doesn't feel like those big boxy options that usually carry that label. And I guess that's because typically Jaguar have designed something with the style and the performance and the space you might need in a package that is satisfyingly different. Jaguar's first attempt at an SUV is a very good one. The F-Pace delivers decent performance from its 3-litre supercharged motor, and it's capable when faced with challenging corners. The 8-speed auto box isn't as incisive as it could be though. It may be the biggest one yet, but from the exterior styling to the interior execution, it's a Jag through and through, with only some hard plastics on the doors raising some minor concerns.